Hi, I'm Valerie. My boss, a man I'd given over a decade of my life to, looked me dead in the eye and told me to act my age. He fired me, just like that. No warning, no discussion, just a dismissive smirk and a severance package. They all thought I'd just fade away. But there was one small detail they overlooked, one forgotten promise from years ago that I never forgot. Now, they're the ones watching their empire crumble. And the best part? They still have no idea it was me who started it all. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed. Because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. I was expecting a routine performance review. Nothing extraordinary, just another Tuesday afternoon, another set of quarterly targets to discuss. My sensible pumps clicked a familiar rhythm against the polished concrete floors of our sleek, minimalist office in downtown Seattle, a place I'd practically built from the ground up, shaping its culture and client relationships for over a decade. The new, overly enthusiastic receptionist gave me a wide, plastic smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. I offered a polite nod and pushed open the heavy glass door to Mr. Harrison's office. That's when I saw the champagne. Not just any champagne, but the expensive imported kind we usually reserved for closing major deals. A tiered display of gourmet cupcakes sat on his gleaming mahogany desk, and a giant banner, hastily hung, declared, "Streamlining for Success, New Leadership." My stomach did a confused flip. I stepped inside, my heart thumping a strange, discordant beat. The entire executive team was already seated. Mr. Harrison, our head of HR, the newly appointed VP of Sales, and even a representative from the board. Faces turned towards me. Some looked uncomfortably eager, others stared at their hands. And then I saw him. Marcus, Mr. Harrison's nephew, impeccably dressed in a tailored suit, his hair slicked back as if he was about to accept a prestigious award. I blinked, forcing my face into a polite, neutral expression. No one had mentioned anything about a celebration, let alone a leadership change. "Valerie," Mr. Harrison began, his voice surprisingly jovial. "Glad you could make it. Marcus was just about to tell us the exciting news." Glad I could. Make it? I had scheduled this meeting. Marcus stood, a predatory gleam in his eyes. "Today marks a new era for Harrison & Co.," he announced, his voice smooth and confident. "We are proud to announce a transition in leadership. I will be taking over as the new Chief Operating Officer, effective immediately." The room erupted in polite applause. I stood there, utterly motionless, suspended somewhere between disbelief and profound humiliation. No one had told me. Not a single whisper, not an email, not even a cryptic memo. Marcus beamed, basking in the spotlight, completely oblivious to the silent storm raging within me. My hands remained limp at my sides as I stared at him, searching, hoping for a flicker of decency, a trace of an explanation. But he turned towards the executive team, already moving on, a dismissive wave of his hand sealing my fate. "I believe it's time to streamline operations and position the company for a more youthful, dynamic future," he declared, his voice dripping with carefully rehearsed charm. And in that spirit, I didn't even hear the next line clearly. Our head of HR, Ms. Albright, a woman I'd personally hired and mentored, walked towards me, a manila folder clutched in her hand, my name printed starkly on the tab. Termination. My breath hitched. My eyes darted to Mr. Harrison. He looked everywhere but at me, a faint flush creeping up his neck. Marcus stepped closer, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "It's not personal, Valerie. You've just outgrown your role. Time to act your age." Not personal? I had signed the initial lease agreement for this office with Mr. Harrison the week I turned 26. I was the one who had canceled my honeymoon to spearhead our biggest client acquisition, pulling the company out of a major slump. I had skipped family holidays, neglected personal milestones, Even missed my own grandmother's funeral because there was always a crisis to avert, a project to oversee, a deal to close. And now I was being told I'd outgrown my role and to act my age? It was a direct insult, a thinly veiled swipe at my experience and commitment. I clenched the folder Ms. Albright handed me, already knowing its cold, sterile contents, the standard severance boilerplate. It was final. I forced my legs to move, my sensible pump suddenly feeling impossibly heavy, carrying me out of the office before the insincere applause could resume. The hallway felt endless, my heels echoing too loudly in the sudden silence. I caught up to Marcus just before the elevators. "You couldn't even tell me in private?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. He didn't even turn around. "This is business, Valerie. You always made it too personal." My badge didn't work when I tried to access my own office. A new junior assistant, one I'd barely had time to train, walked past me, holding a box with my name crudely taped to the side. My favorite fountain pens, the framed photo of my team from our last successful launch, even the old, chipped mug that read, "Future CEO." It was all packed, as if they had known this day was coming long before I did. The sunlight outside was too bright, too cheerful for the crushing weight in my chest. I sat in the driver's seat of my car, gripping the steering wheel, my knuckles white. I didn't cry. Not yet. I drove home on autopilot, the Seattle traffic a blurry, meaningless din. My apartment felt strangely quiet, echoing with an unfamiliar emptiness. The coffee maker blinked. 10:15 a.m., still morning, still the same day. I had walked in expecting a normal meeting and been walked out as if I didn't matter at all. I leaned against the kitchen counter, the box beside me, a monument to a decade of dedication summarily dismissed. I opened it, intending to put things away, but my fingers stopped on something familiar. A small, tarnished silver locket. My mother had given it to me the day I started at Harrison & Co. "Wear this, Valerie," she'd said. "Always remember, your worth." I pressed it into my palm and sat at the kitchen table, and then it came. The sobs, not loud, not theatrical, just sharp, breathless bursts that stole my air. I felt stupid, used, utterly erased. My phone buzzed. A news alert. Harrison & Cozars appoints dynamic new COO, signaling fresh direction. Fresh direction? I was their direction, their bedrock. Just invisible now. I reached into the box for a tissue and felt something tucked under the cardboard flap. A plain envelope, no label, just my name scrawled in hurried, frantic handwriting. It hadn't been in the original packing. I stared at it. It was from our legal counsel, only addressed to me. The paper shook in my hand. I didn't open it right away. I needed to breathe first, but deep down, I knew this letter might change everything. I sat there at the kitchen table, the late afternoon light slanting through the blinds, dust motes dancing in the muted golden haze. My fingers trembled as I broke the seal. The flap resisted slightly, as if it knew what was inside wasn't meant for me to see, or at least not in the way they'd planned. The paper inside was heavier than I expected, not the cheap printer kind. This was the good stock, embossed at the top with Harrison & Co.'s legal letterhead. I unfolded the pages slowly, my stomach tightening with every crease. It wasn't a severance package. It was a copy of a notarized agreement dated 5 years ago. I skimmed the opening lines and felt my breath catch. It was the night Marcus came to my apartment, practically in tears. The night he said he was scared the company wouldn't make payroll, that if we didn't find $500,000 by the end of the week, we'd default on a critical supplier contract and lose our biggest client. I'd barely slept that week, pulling all-nighters, working every contact I had. I remembered driving 4 hours to Portland in the middle of the night because a lawyer I trusted was based there. I remembered sitting in his sterile office with a lukewarm cup of gas station coffee in hand, my hair still damp from a rushed shower, as I signed the temporary power of attorney and wired the funds from my personal savings. Marcus had sworn, "Valerie, I'll never forget this. I mean it. You saved us." Apparently he had. The document in my hands was clear. I had transferred the funds personally, and in return, I'd been granted a 15% non-dilutable voting stake, active unless I submitted a signed resignation. A resignation I never gave. So no, they couldn't just toss me out like a forgotten memo. They knew. They had to know. The only reason they thought they could get away with it was if they assumed I'd forgotten, that I'd lost the paperwork, that I was still the same trusting girl who put family loyalty, even to a pseudo-family business, before legal leverage. They were banking on my silence. I pressed my thumb along the embossed seal. The ink hadn't faded. The signature, Marcus's, still curled at the bottom next to mine. Everything inside me went still. They hadn't just pushed me out. They'd tried to erase me after everything I'd done. My mind started racing. I went out to the garage, the door groaning as I opened it, letting in the thick, late-afternoon heat. Dust hung in the air, clinging to the boxes stacked along the far wall. I dug through them. Old files, thumb drives, a couple labeled tax folders from years back. I found the one I was hoping hadn't gone missing during my last move. Inside, emails printed out and stapled, labeled by month. There were a few wire receipts from the bank showing the exact transfer and a flash drive taped inside a folder. I plugged it into my laptop right there on the workbench. There it was, a voice memo. Marcus's. Recorded 4 days after the loan. "I don't know how to thank you, Valerie. If I ever forget this, I don't deserve to be in charge of anything, let alone this company." I played it twice. The second time, I didn't cry. I didn't flinch. I just let the cold resolve settle in. This wasn't just betrayal, it was a full rewrite of history, and I'd been too trusting to see it coming. Back inside, I gathered my laptop, the letter, and a few key documents. I packed them neatly into my leather tote, one of the few luxury items I'd allowed myself, a gift after closing a particularly tough deal. I didn't want to be at home anymore. I needed a place to think. I drove down the road and stopped at a quiet coffee shop tucked between a bookstore and an old record store, the kind of place where no one really asks questions if you stay too long. I ordered a strong black coffee, found a table by the window, and opened my laptop. For the next 2 hours, I combed through every email I had archived. I pulled up sales reports I'd signed, client proposals with my detailed comments, and financial breakdowns I'd personally assembled during the 2020 downturn. I saved screenshots, labeled folders, bookmarked everything. The longer I worked, the less I felt like someone licking their wounds and more like someone preparing for battle. They thought I'd go quietly. They'd underestimated me. When my inbox pinged, I paused. A new email. Subject line. "This isn't right. We need to talk." It was from David, the company's lead accountant. He'd been there for years, kept mostly to himself, loyal but exceptionally observant. I clicked the message, my heart pounding. The coffee shop emptied out slowly, leaving only the quiet hum of the espresso machine and a soft indie rock playlist echoing from overhead. I closed my laptop, tucked it into my bag, and stepped outside into the Seattle dusk. A chill had crept into the air, late spring, pretending to be winter for one last night. The address he gave me wasn't far. I walked the few blocks past, shuttered. Storefronts and rows of cars with dew beginning to settle on their windshields. His apartment building was old but clean, tucked between a small independent grocery store and a dry cleaner that hadn't updated its signage since the 90s. He answered after 2 knocks. David had always looked a little tired, even back at the car office. But tonight, he looked like a man who hadn't slept in weeks. "I'm glad you came," he said, stepping aside. I followed him into a living room with mismatched furniture and a pile of unopened mail stacked by the door. He motioned for me to sit, then hovered by a small table where his laptop and a stack of USB drives sat waiting like evidence in a courtroom. "They told me to delete everything," he began, his voice low. "Minutes from board meetings, your shareholder records, voting logs. I was supposed to make it look like you never mattered." My stomach turned. I stayed silent, letting the weight of his words settle. He opened his laptop and clicked through a folder labeled Truth Archive. "They said if I kept quiet, I'd get a promotion. They assumed I'd play along because I'm invisible too. Just the accountant." He pressed play on the first file. Mr. Harrison's voice, clear and cold, filled the room. "She was never meant to last here. She's dead weight, an emotional liability." I didn't flinch, but I felt my throat tighten. David glanced over, but I didn't break eye contact with the screen. Next recording. This time, Marcus. "She's good, but we need someone more presentable, more dynamic. The firm needs a fresh face, not someone who's stuck in the past." I didn't cry. Not now. The time for that had passed. Instead, I said quietly, "Did they sign off on it?" He nodded. "Mr. Harrison was hesitant at first. Your cousin Marcus pushed it. Hard. He didn't fight long." I stood and paced the room, each step measured. "And you still have the originals?" "I kept everything," he admitted, his eyes downcast. "Out of guilt, mostly. And fear." "I'm not here to punish you, David," I said, my voice firm. "I'm here to correct what they buried." He handed me the USB drives. "There's one more thing," he added, his voice barely audible. "The client retreat, the one you skipped." A memory flickered, me trying to close a critical deal remotely while battling a severe flu, answering emails at 3 a.m. while they posted filtered photos from exclusive resorts. I remembered ignoring texts about mandatory team-building exercises and watching those same colleagues toast champagne and wear matching bathrobes on social media. When I returned, half my projects were reassigned. No explanation, no welcome back, just smiles that didn't reach their eyes. "That's when it started," David continued. "They used your absence to argue you were disengaged, that you couldn't keep up." Back in the present, I turned toward David. "You've done enough. Thank you." He nodded, his face etched with relief. "I'll deny it if they come for me." "You won't have to," I assured him. "I'm not going through the courts yet." Back at my place, I poured a glass of water and sat by the kitchen island, the same one where I'd once signed loan forms to save this company. I pulled out my old encrypted hard drive, copied over the files, and labeled the folder Rebirth. I opened my LinkedIn account. It had been dormant for years, another sacrifice I'd made to appear solely dedicated to Harrison and Co. Within minutes of reactivation, notifications poured in. But one message froze me mid-sip. "Hey, stranger," it read. "Still got that spark? I may have a proposition." The message sat open on my screen, and for a few seconds, I just stared at it. Ethan Thorne. I hadn't heard his name in years, not since he left Harrison and Co., with nothing more than a curt nod and a tight smile. He'd been my mentor once, maybe the only one who genuinely saw me for more than just a dedicated employee. The email continued. "I always knew who the real architect behind those innovative projects was. Let's build something that's truly yours this time. Your name on the door, a full seat at the table. Come talk." 2 days later, I found myself standing in front of a sleek glass building in the heart of downtown, sunlight gleaming off its mirrored windows. The lobby smelled like fresh cedar and rich ground espresso. Nothing like the stale carpet and suffocating ego of Harrison and Co. I glanced at my reflection as I walked through the automatic doors. I didn't look broken anymore. I looked like someone who had remembered her own worth. Ethan greeted me in the open concept workspace with a hug that lingered just a second longer than necessary. "There she is," he said, grinning. "The ghost they tried to bury." He introduced me to a few members of his leadership team, people who looked me in the eye, who shook my hand like I truly mattered. He walked me to a glass-walled conference room and slid a crisp, leather folder across the table. "Partner, track," he said plainly. "No back rooms, no backstabbing, but I know you've got unfinished business. We can wait. Not forever, but for now." I didn't touch the folder. Not yet. That evening, back in my apartment, I opened David's files. Again. One in particular caught my eye, labeled Project Gemini Funding Signed PDF. I remembered the deal vaguely. It was a fast-tracked funding injection done under immense pressure. I had heard about it at the tail end, too late to weigh in with. My expertise. The file loaded slowly. My stomach knotted as I scrolled down and saw it. My signature at the bottom of the document. Only I'd never signed that page. Not then. Not ever. I pulled out an old notebook where I'd scribbled packing lists a few months back and compared the handwriting, the curves, the slant. It was close, disturbingly so, but not mine. Marcus. He'd signed it using my name without my knowledge. It wasn't even a good forgery. He didn't know I looped my lowercase v differently, sloppy, entitled. He must have thought I'd never check. I leaned back, the laptop humming quietly on my coffee table. Mr. Harrison once told me business was about integrity, that in this company, your word was your bond. I wondered what he'd say now, after letting Marcus bond my name to something I never approved. My thoughts took me back to that awful boardroom day. I remembered Marcus's polished speech, the scripted smiles, the projections I didn't recognize. He'd wielded charts I'd never contributed to, citing decisions I hadn't seen. And now I knew why. That forged signature had given him control he'd never earned, and I had been played like a pawn. Still, I didn't scream. I didn't cry. Instead, I went to the printer and watched the pages slide out, physical proof of their fraud. I tucked the forged contract into a plain envelope and wrote in neat black ink, "To the Office of Business Ethics, State of Washington." This wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about setting fire to the lie they'd built and standing in the smoke with my head held high. I sealed the envelope and stood still in my living room for a moment, letting the silence wrap around me like armor. Then I whispered, "They want someone more dynamic. Let's see how dynamic they look in front of investigators." I walked back to my laptop, opened LinkedIn, and hit reactivate. The screen refreshed. Pings started flowing in. Welcomes, old colleagues, recruiters. But one name stopped me cold. Ethan again. Not the professional message this time. Just, "Hey, stranger, still got that spark? I may have a proposition." The county clerk barely looked up as she slid the stamped document back across the counter to me. "All filed," she said, tapping the seal. "Effective immediately." I slipped it into my leather folio, nodded politely, and turned to leave. Behind me, her voice cut through the silence of the marble-floored hallway. "You sure this won't stir things up?" I didn't turn around. "Oh, I'm counting on it." By the time I stepped into the parking lot, the morning haze had burned off. Sunlight spilled across the asphalt like nothing was wrong with the world. But I felt it. A shift. Quiet, but permanent. Like something inside me had finally locked into place. Back home, I kicked off my shoes, made myself a strong black coffee, and opened my laptop. The desktop was a minefield of folders I hadn't looked through in years. Receipts, scanned contracts, forgotten backups from the cloud. I clicked on one named Harrison Calls 2022 without thinking. I almost deleted it, but something made me open the logs first. Scrolling through, I found it. A call saved by accident, synced when I was still on the family phone plan and helping Mr. Harrison set up his new smartphone. The file was short, just under 2 minutes. The date made my stomach twist. 3 days before the executive vote that ousted me. I hit play. Marcus's voice crackled to life on speaker. Valerie is good, yeah, but she's soft. Too loyal to fight me on anything. The line paused. Maybe whoever was on the other end laughed or nodded. Then Marcus added, That's why I win. Uncle knows it. She still thinks dedication gets you somewhere. I stopped breathing. The words hit harder than I expected. There wasn't rage, not at first. Just the kind of ache that makes your limbs feel heavy, the kind that hollows out your ribs. He'd said it so casually, like it wasn't even cruel. Just true. I sat there for a long moment, the cursor blinking in the corner of the screen like it was waiting on me to do something. I whispered, This isn't me. I almost deleted it, but instead I clicked save. I created a new folder, named it Contingency Exposure. Then I dragged the audio file inside and closed the window. I stood, stretched, and walked to the kitchen to refill my mug. My hands were steady now. By the time I sat back down, I had made up my mind. I logged into the Harrison & Co. executive system, the one I still had legacy access to thanks to a long-forgotten clause in my initial employment contract that Marcus never bothered to revoke. I navigated to the power of attorney settings and uploaded the new revocation order, legal, stamped, and signed that morning. The moment I clicked confirm, his authority to act on my behalf, specifically regarding certain long-term contracts and client agreements I had originally brokered, vanished. I smiled, not out of revenge, but because I finally felt like I was driving my own damn car again. Later that evening, I showered, pulled out a charcoal blazer I hadn't worn in a year, and packed a tote with just the essentials. My laptop, a thumb drive, the printed revocation, and the audio file burned onto a disk and labeled in red Sharpie. Before zipping it shut, I opened my email one last time and attached the recording to a new draft. I typed in my own address, filled the subject line with 5 words. Use only if he forgets. I hit send. Then I powered off the laptop, stood up straight, and glanced at my reflection in the hallway mirror. I didn't look broken. I looked ready. I left the envelope with the clerk, walked out of the county building, and didn't look back. Not out of defiance, but because I didn't need to anymore. That part of me, the one who always glanced over her shoulder, hoping to be acknowledged, hoping to be chosen, she was gone. By evening, I was pulling up to the annual industry gala Marcus had spent months planning. His face was plastered on the program, his name at the top of the donor board, Harrison & Co., a legacy he seized like a crown, forged with gold. I helped mine. The valet raised an eyebrow when he saw me step out of the car. I wasn't on the original guest list, but that didn't matter. Not tonight. Inside, the ballroom shimmered with chandeliers and curated perfection. Wait staff in black vests glided between white linen tables, and conversations floated like champagne. Bubbles, superficial and meant to impress. When I entered, a few heads turned. Some smiled politely, others whispered. But when Marcus saw me from across the room, his expression froze for a moment. Then, just like he'd rehearsed 1,000 times, he smiled and glided to the microphone. Ladies and gentlemen, he began, his voice like velvet. We built Harrison & Co. on innovation, on trust, on knowing when to lead and when to let go. Some of us, his eyes flicked to mine, understand that better than others. A polite ripple of laughter followed. I didn't flinch. Instead, I lifted my glass, locked eyes with him, and smiled. Not the kind of smile that warms a room, the kind that makes people shift in their seats, unsure if they just missed something important. After the speech, I didn't stay for the applause. As I walked toward the coat check, I passed Marcus again. His smile faltered as I passed, but he didn't say a word. Backstage, I knew he was checking his phone, probably trying to move funds or secure his position before I made my next move. That's when it began. His voice behind the curtain, sharp, hushed, but frantic. What do you mean access denied? That account is under my authority. Pause. What do you mean it's been revoked? Who signed off? He burst through the curtain, heels clicking like panic in motion. A board member stood beside him, hands raised in neutrality. It's been updated, Marcus. Legally. We were notified this morning. I didn't stay to watch him spiral. I already knew the sound. Outside, the air was crisp. I made my way to the parking lot slowly, savoring the first breath of control in years. But I wasn't surprised when he followed. You think this is over? He snapped, his voice slicing the quiet like a blade. You just made the biggest mistake of your life. I turned, let the silence stretch long enough to sting, then calmly stated, Then I guess we both have something to regret. He stepped closer. You think you can win against me? I was chosen. You were convenient. His voice cracked at the edges, not from sadness, from fury. I stepped aside, giving him the path back to his car. You have a lovely night, Marcus. Back in my apartment, the stillness welcomed me. I set my purse down, changed into sweatpants, and poured a glass of water. Then I noticed the door. Scratched deep, like someone had tried to force it open. My stomach dropped. I opened the mailbox in the lobby. The metal was bent like someone had pried it. Security reviewed the cameras, the officer said later that night over the phone. We caught a figure near your vehicle, but they stayed just out of frame. No plates, no face, nothing taken, nothing broken. Just disturbed enough to make you feel watched. Back upstairs, I sat in the dark, let the quiet settle around me like armor. Then I reached for my phone, played the voicemail I'd saved days earlier. Marcus's voice, light and smug. She won't fight back. She never does. That's why I always win. I let it play again and again. Then I whispered to the silence, let's change that. 2 days after filing the revocation, I parked, a block away from the community center, and sat in the car for a moment, watching people filter in. Marcus's sleek black sedan was already there, parked close to the front with deliberate precision. He never arrived late, and never without intention. I checked my purse again, even though I knew it was there. A sealed envelope. The contents. Notarized and final. My hand brushed against it like muscle memory. I took a steadying breath, then stepped out into the warm dusk. Inside, the HOA meeting was already underway. I heard his voice before I saw him, crisp, polished, echoing through the open hall. He was mid-presentation, gesturing toward a projection of a proposed development project. And as acting trustee, he said with that trademark smile, I've streamlined the permitting process for Phase 1. Efficiency is everything. Phase 1 was slated to break ground on property still tied to a legacy trust, my share included. I didn't rush. I walked slowly down the side of the room, past rows of neighbors and board members, and gently placed the envelope in front of the chairman. No words, no announcement, just presence. People turned. He did too. For a heartbeat, he froze. Then he smiled tighter. Well, look who finally decided to show up. I said nothing, just took a seat in the back row, calm, controlled. The chairman looked confused at first. He glanced down, opened the envelope, and unfolded the papers, his brow tightening. Then he motioned to another member beside him. Whispers began. I waited. Moments later, he cleared his throat. Before we move on, with item 4, we need to pause for legal review of this revocation notice. It affects the legitimacy of recent asset control declarations. Marcus's lips twitched. Oh, come on, he said too quickly. This is last-minute theatrics. None of this is official. The chair didn't budge. It's notarized and time-stamped. We'll table further votes until council weighs in. For the first time in a long while, I saw him blink in silence. His eyes scanned the room like someone searching for backup that never arrived. After the meeting, I didn't linger. I walked out before the murmurs started, before anyone asked questions, but as I passed by the entryway, I caught the faintest thread of a whisper behind me. Someone said, "I thought she was gone for good." I kept walking. That evening, I met Chloe at a little cafe near the waterfront, one she always loved for its open patio and live music. She'd already claimed a table near the back, nursing a tea and scanning her tablet. "You were subtle today," she said as I sat down. "But surgical." I smiled faintly. Surgical is the only kind that leaves a scar. She tapped her tablet. "The story's there, Valerie. The shady transfers, the silent ouster, the forged signatures. You've got enough to make people question everything they think they know about Marcus and Harrison and Co. I haven't decided if I want this to be public," I said carefully. Chloe looked at me for a long moment. "You helped me once when no one else would. I wouldn't be in this job without you, so I won't push. But I'll be ready when you are." I glanced out toward the street. "People love a Phoenix story, don't they?" "They love the fire more," she replied, a knowing glint in her eye. I didn't commit to anything, but I didn't stop her either. On the drive home, a song came on the radio. Fleetwood Mac, Landslide. My mother used to play it on repeat, while cleaning the kitchen on Sundays. I could almost smell lemon polish and hear the dishwasher clattering. Her voice echoed in my head. "Let him shine, Val. It's his turn." I spoke into the quiet cabin of my car. It was never a turn. "Mom?" It was a sentence. I pulled into my driveway just as the last note faded. Inside, I dropped my purse on the hall bench and took a moment to stand still. No noise, no rush, just breath. Then I walked to the drawer at the end of the hallway, the one I hadn't touched since before the restructuring. I opened it slowly and pulled out the old ledger wrapped in faded floral fabric. Marcus always swore it had been lost in a flood during the warehouse move. I never corrected him. My thumb brushed the edge of the binding. It was heavier than I remembered, not just from ink or paper. It carried weight because now it had context. I picked up my phone, stared at Chloe's name a moment, then pressed call. She answered on the second ring. "I'm ready," I said. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. I stayed up the night before, reviewing every line in the ledger, every receipt, every scribbled annotation in my own handwriting. It wasn't just about money. It was about memory. Proof that I had been there all along, holding up the foundation while they painted over the cracks. At 6:04 a.m., Chloe texted, "One word, live." I didn't move for a moment. I just stared at the screen as the article began spreading. The headline was bold, simple, and direct. "The Silent Architect, What Really Happened Inside Harrison and Co." She hadn't exaggerated. The article was clean, tight, and impossible to ignore. It began with our origin story. A mentor, a protege, and a dream. But then it peeled back the years. Document scans, timeline graphics, side-by-side images of my name on founding documents, and photos of Marcus accepting awards alone. Chloe hadn't just written a story. She told the truth. Within hours, my inbox lit up like it hadn't in years. A message from an old intern, Daniel. "I always thought something didn't add up. Thank you for speaking." Another from one of our earliest clients, Miss Chen. "Valerie, I always respected your quiet steadiness. Let me know if you ever start something new." Then came the one I didn't expect. "Hi, Valerie. I'd like to speak to you about next steps. J. Peterson, Zenith Capital." Peterson had been one of our seed investors, a notoriously shrewd and influential figure in the industry. If he was reaching out now, that meant real shift. That meant money moving. I was pouring a cup of coffee when my phone rang. I didn't even need to check the screen. You vindictive witch. Marcus's voice was so shrill it clipped through the receiver. Do you think this will fix anything? Do you think they're going to see you as a victim? You're pathetic. I built this. I didn't say a word, just hit end. I let him scream into silence. By late afternoon, a formal letter arrived in my inbox. His lawyer was filing a cease and desist and threatening a defamation suit. Attached to the complaint were official financial records meant to show his exclusive leadership. But as I scrolled through the attached files, something stopped me cold. It was a report from 2019, the Project Gemini proposal Marcus had pushed forward without me. And right there, buried on page 6, was the same falsified ledger he had used to convince the board I'd become non-essential. Only now he was citing it in a legal claim, as if no one had kept the original. He didn't know I had. That evening, I met Mr. Evans, my attorney, in his small but tidy office. He didn't waste time with pleasantries. I take it this is urgent, he asked, closing his office door behind me. I handed him the fabric-wrapped ledger, the same one I'd kept hidden for years, tucked behind old tax boxes and moving files. This is the original, I said. He's lying again, but this time on record. He opened it, flipped to the right section, and gave a quiet whistle through his teeth. Well, this just turned into perjury. He looked up, eyes sharp now. We're not on defense anymore. By nightfall, the story had made it to national syndication. Not front page, but loud enough to rattle. And rattled they were. I drove, back through the old business park near the highway where we first started. Most of the lights were off, but my old office still had that warm glow through the blinds. I parked, walked inside with permission from the new tenant, an architect who admired what we'd once built. My old desk was gone, but in the corner still sat the wide, low-back chair Mr. Harrison had built with his own hands when I first joined. Pine-sanded smooth. The initials VM carved in the back slat, faded but proud. I ran my hand along the grain. For years, I'd felt like I was filling in for someone else. Like the role was never meant for me, like I had to earn a seat at a table I helped build. But tonight, I didn't feel like an understudy. I didn't feel like a placeholder. I felt like the author. And that night, I didn't sleep. Not because I was afraid, but because I was finally ready. 2 weeks later, I stood before the courtroom doors with both feet planted, not shaking, not second-guessing, just steady. Inside, it was quiet. Marcus sat at the opposing table, dressed, like he was still trying to win a popularity contest. His lawyer looked tense, tapping a pen, flipping pages they should have reviewed better. The judge took his seat and adjusted his glasses. We've reviewed the financial documents submitted by the plaintiff, he began, his voice firm but not theatrical. There are discrepancies between the version submitted by Mr. Marcus Harrison and the original ledger obtained by the defense. He looked directly at Marcus. Submitting forged financial records to this court is not just an error. It is a criminal offense. The room didn't gasp. It just went still. Marcus didn't speak. His jaw locked in place, eyes wide, but he didn't look at me. He looked at the judge like he'd spoken a language he'd never been forced to learn. Before, consequence. His lawyer leaned in, whispering frantically, but Marcus shook his head like someone refusing to believe gravity. The judge continued. Given the submission of fraudulent material, we're referring this case for criminal review under Penal Code 115. Additionally, the court orders financial penalties to be paid to the defendant for damages incurred. Just like that, it was over. Outside, reporters were already gathering. Microphones, questions, lenses. I didn't speak. I didn't need to. I walked past the crowd, calm. I let the story speak for itself. Later that afternoon, I met Chloe at a corner coffee shop near her newsroom. We sat near the window, the sunlight warming our hands on ceramic mugs. She stirred her drink, glanced at me. Do you regret any of it? I thought for a moment. Not about the courtroom. Not about Marcus. I thought about the quiet Sunday mornings I spent buried in work while he entertained clients, the nights I answered emails from the hospital when my father was sick, the silence I accepted every time my name was left off a press release. I regret thinking I needed their permission to matter, I said. Chloe didn't respond right. Away. Just nodded the way someone does when they know you've said something that took years to find the words for. That evening, I returned to my new studio, a co-working space I'd helped open with 2 other women, both founders who'd been forced out of their own companies. One had been pushed out by her ex-husband, the other by a board of directors who didn't think she looked global enough. We had no receptionist, no glass trophy cases, just worn hardwood floors, real plants, secondhand desks, and freedom. My workspace was simple: a laptop, a corkboard, a window that caught morning light, and the chair. My father's chair, cleaned, polished, the wood now warm, amber in tone. I had a small plaque engraved and fastened along the back. It read, "2. The one who stayed silent and then spoke the loudest." I didn't cry when I read it. I just sat, let the weight of it settle. My story wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about reclaiming. As I looked out the window at the street below, bustling with people chasing their own dreams, I felt something I hadn't in years. Stillness. Not silence, not submission. Stillness. Later that night, I typed out an email to Chloe with one line. "If they reach out again, tell them I've said all I needed to." And then I recorded a voice note for myself, something I could return to if ever I forgot. Sometimes justice doesn't roar. It shows up quietly in a courtroom, in an old chair, or in a new beginning. I sat back, let the words echo, and then I asked myself aloud, not needing an answer. Have you ever experienced betrayal from someone you trusted completely? How did you respond? With anger, strategic action, or something else entirely? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. And if this account of reclaiming what was rightfully mine resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to my channel for more stories about navigating life's most challenging moments. Thank you for joining me on this journey of loss, determination, and ultimately, redemption.